Hello, and welcome back to our web development tutorial series here on Turbo 360. At the end of the last video, at the end of part 2, we scaffolded our project, installed the dependencies, and quickly ran our project locally to make sure everything was in proper working order. So we are now ready to begin customizing our project for our own website. So let's go ahead and do that. Here I am in the root level of my project directory. Make sure you are here as well. I'm going to do a quick run just to make sure everything is still working properly. So I'm going to use npm run serve because this gives us a dev server. Copy and paste the localhost 3000 and just make sure everything looks good here. And we are all good to go. So turn off the server by doing Control-C, and let's head back into the code. You may recall at the end of the last video, the app.js is where the code actually begins. The actual code logic begins here. So let's step through this and reconfigure this for our own project. So this top line right here is just a comment. We don't really need that. So what's going on here on lines 1 and 2 is we're importing two packages, two libraries to use in our code, specifically the Vertex and the Express library. So the Express framework we're importing right here. Don't worry about Vertex right now. This is basically the bridge to our server. This is what's going to enable us to deploy to our hosting environment on Turbo, which we will do at the end of this video. But the important line right here is Express. We're using the Express web framework. And right here on line 4, we are initializing Express. We're creating what's called an instance of the Express application and calling it app right here. The important thing to remember, to understand here, is that we are using two libraries from our package.json. So you'll see the Vertex 360 and the Express library names in the package.json right here. So these two we are using in the actual code right now. So we are initializing an Express application right here on line 4, and then skip down a little bit to line 25, and we are configuring that application. So basically, these are the default configuration options that the Turbo scaffold generating engine provides for us. This saves us a lot of lines, which basically connects a lot of things like the templating engine and how to access the static assets folder and things of that sort, all those things which we'll go through during this series. So this is a quick shortcut to get through all that so we can get into our code logic right away. And here we're importing two routes and setting those routes. So this is where we're going to take over the application. So we're going to remove this and replace it with our own custom logic. So let's discuss what's happening there. So websites are basically logic that responds to what's called a request. A request is when a person visits a website through a browser. That's called a request. And so a request comes to a website, and then the website returns a response. That's called the request response cycle. And that cycle, the request response cycle, happens inside of what's called a route. So these route files are responsible for responding to a request and then generating an appropriate response. And you'll see right here on line 28, we're importing a route called index right here from the routes folder. So if you open the routes folder, if you expand it right here, you'll see a file called index. And you'll see another one called API right here, routes API. And these route files are responsible for creating a response to various requests. And so this is really where the main logic happens of the Node Express website. The route files are probably the most important files in terms of creating the actual website response. So what that means is what we want to do is remove these routes and use our own so we can create our own website. So let's go ahead and do that. So let's go ahead and remove these routes, which means this website will no longer work until we replace them with our own routes. So let's do So here I'm importing a route called main, the main route, from the routes folder, which be aware that does not exist right now, so this won't work. And then let's set what's called the path. So here we're setting the path. And here we're importing the route. So what's going on here is that when we make a home page request, so / means just the home page, in this case it's going to be localhost 3000, we want the website to use the main route to execute the logic. So that's what we're saying here. We're importing the route, and then when the person, the browser, etc. makes a request to the home page, which is just a /, then please use the main route to create the proper response. And that's exactly what we're telling the project to do right here. Again, we don't have the main route created, so we have to create it right now. So we head over to the routes folder right here, and we create a new file called main.js, because again, this is a JavaScript runtime. And here's where we create our route. So here's where we do our logic. So the first thing we're going to need to do is import the Express framework. And Express provides us a tool called the router, which is the route logic handler. So we do express.router like so. And this router tool is the tool that we will use to generate the responses to the requests. Now before I do anything, we want to do what's called a module exports, and just do that like so. And what this line does, line 4, the module exports, is it enables us to use this file in other files of this project, which we are doing in the app.js right here. So if we didn't do a module exports, this wouldn't work properly. So just remember that. It's very easy to forget. Oftentimes I forget this, and that leads to unpredictable behavior. So now here we're going to actually create the request response cycle that I described a few moments ago. So we do router and then get. So requests come in a variety of forms. There's a handful of request types. The most common type is a GET. So when you go to your browser and do www.google.com, you're sending a GET request to the browser address, the URL. We are creating a GET handler, and we're saying when a user makes a home page request, please execute the following logic. So make sure you do exactly what I did right here. So again, if that was too fast, it looks like this, comma, and then we insert here what's called a function. And inside the function here, we have our request and our response objects. So request and response. And there's a third object called next, which I'll get to in a later video, but for now the important things are these two right here, request and response. So what's going on is that this is the incoming request, the www.google.com or localhost 3000, etc., and then it is up to us to generate a corresponding response based on the request. So we take the response object, and I'm going to send back a string called hello, like that. And this is going to be the response. Now make sure you save this. This is very easy to forget. Is sometimes you'll see this little circle right here. You see that? That means your file has not been saved. Just do a Command S and save it. Otherwise it won't work and it'll be confusing. So here we're taking the response and we're sending back a hello string. So that should be what shows up in the browser in response to the request. So what that means is this connection should now work. So let's go ahead and run it in our local host. So we do npm run serve. Wait for the confirmation, and copy and paste localhost into the browser, and we should see hello. So that's how a very simple request response cycle works using Node.js and Express. I'm going to turn the server off by doing Control-C. And again, the important takeaway here is that inside the app.js, we are importing a route file, and then we're setting the path for the route file. And then the route file is where the actual logic happens. So here is we're setting a get handler for the main path, and we're sending back a response, which in this case is just hello. And just for simple illustration, if I go back to the app.js and I say hello in this part right here, I've now changed the path. So by running the localhost server, the local server, this path has now been changed. So this will no longer work. In fact, it'll just give me an error, cannot get. But if I do /hello, now I'm back to where I was before. And that's what I mean by the path. That's what this guy does. So setting the path is very, very important. And these path settings are how we determine which route responds to which requests. So hopefully that makes sense. I'm going to remove this because I don't want to keep that for the entire project. And this will bring us back to what we had before, like that. Okay, so that's how you handle simple request response. Obviously, requests and response get a little bit more complicated than this. So in the next video, we're going to discuss how to handle more sophisticated responses like returning HTML and handling parameters and more dynamic responses. So stay tuned for that. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.